So I would like first to thanks a lot the organizer for this very interesting school, and I apologize of not being here today. I would really enjoy participate to this school with you, exchange about your research subject. So I really apologize for that. This course, just to introduce a bit, I think a preliminary version of this course started in 2014 in the context of a tutorial in ICASP. This course was designed with Jean-Christophe Pesquet. And since then, the course continued to change each year according to new development in optimization. So I hope it will give you a sufficiently large overview about optimization for signal, image processing, but also on machine learning. I will first, so if you have any questions during this course, please do not hesitate to interrupt me. It's difficult to really see your interaction just on the camera, but please feel free to ask any question. You will see that a part which is dedicated to some basic concept, in a sense, will introduce. There are some examples where I can wait for some answer for you, so maybe it will work. Maybe if I see it's too difficult to wait for answer, I'm going to give it directly. We will see how it works. So let's start. I'm going so this is normally a white pages. I'm going to start with the outline of my presentation. So first, the first part is going to be dedicated to a general introduction of about optimization and why it is useful in signal processing, in image processing, in machine learning. So I will give you example. Probably it will make relation with the previous courses you already have. And it will allow you to also be more familiar with the basic concepts. Then I will introduce the basics in optimizations, some concepts such as what is a convex function, what is a proper function, what is a lower semi-continuous function, when it's possible to have a minimum, things like that. Then I will introduce the subdifferential concept. Then I'm going to introduce it doesn't work, so the notion of a proximity operator. And then on the it does not work very well, but I hope I will introduce some primal algorithm. So just to identify, on the third part is going to be dedicated to subdifferential, because we will see that in a numerous problem in image processing, in signal processing, but also in machine learning, you have to handle with non-smooth function. And in this context, it's not anymore possible to use a gradient. So you need to define a subdifferential or subgradient. Then, for the same reason, when you handle with a non-smooth function, you cannot handle with the gradient, and then about gradient descent. So you can have recourse to proximity operator. Once this concept will be introduced, I'm going to talk about several primal algorithms, such as forward-backward, Douglas-Rashford, Peaceman-Rashford, and explain when, under which condition, this algorithm converge, and also the concept of a convergence rate. In the sixth part, I'm going to talk about conjugate, duality, and primal dual algorithm. We will see that sometimes primal algorithms are not sufficient in order to solve some problems, and in that case, it's interesting to formulate it either in the dual form or either solve it as a primal dual formulation. So, I will give you all the detail about that and the main classes of algorithm in the context of primal dual algorithm. Then I'm going to talk about unfolded algorithm. So unfolded algorithm allows us to make the link with deep learning. So a part will be dedicated to this subject, and the last part will be dedicated to let's say fast algorithm, how to make fast the primal and the primal dual algorithm, but also to non-convexity, how to handle with non-convexity, and also on stochastic algorithm. So this is the main outline of this course, and just to notice, I think here there will be the practical session where the objective will be to handle with all this concept, subdifferential, proximity operator, primal algorithm, primal dual algorithm, and on a simple example on signal processing, which is going to be this one when you have, let's say, a piecewise, a piecewise constant signal, and this signal, we assume that this signal is going to be noisy, and you want to denoise it. And we will see that it's a very basic example, which is actually very popular in many fields, such as genomics, physics, but it's an interesting example in order to be familiar with all the concepts I listed just here. So I suggest now we start. So I propose first to start with the basic definition of what is a minimization problem. So a minimization problem, let me just try to find where is the... Okay. So first, I'm going to start with the definition of a minimization problem. So a minimization problem involves two things: a cost function and a subset. I'm really sorry, I'm trying to be familiar with... So, and a subset D. So typically here, you see you have a function f, which is defined here, and you have a set D. The objective of a minimization problem is to find the minimum of this function. So typically here the minimum is going to be this x hat. So if we want to do that, if we rephrase that, it means that we want to find a x hat in D such that for every x in D, f of x hat is lower or equal to fx. Another way to define it is to say that equivalently fx hat is the infimum of fx for every x belonging to D. And another way to write it, so it's a definition that it's a definition that we will use a lot. The argmin, it means that x hat belongs to the argminimum of fx for x belonging to D. So the argminimum is the minimizer of f. So it's the argument that minimizes fx. Interestingly, we can also, when you deal with optimization, you can also deal with a maximization problem. So typically, you handle with a reward function. You also have this subset. And in this context, the objective is the following. You want to find the x hat such that fx hat is greater or equal to fx. But you can also reformulate it like that, as finding the x hat such that minus fx hat is lower or equal to fx. Or another way, find x hat belonging to the argminimum of minus fx. So with that, you can see that every maximization problem can also be formulated as a minimization problem. And so without loss of generality, in this presentation, we are going to focus on minimization problems. So now I'm going to give you example of several D. So D can be all space, so Rn, and in this context is going to be a non-constrained problem. D can be countable, and it's typically the context of discrete optimization. You can also have a specific case of discrete optimization. So here you see that the discretization is not regular, while here the discretization is regular. And then you can have also D, which are uncountable. Typically, you can have D that can be expressed as a constraint formulated like that, involving function gi such that gix equals 0. A particular case is the context of a linear constraint, where you typically have gix, which is equal to the scalar product of ai with x plus a bi, where bi belongs to R and ai belongs to Rn. And you can reformulate it like that. So the associated minimization problem is illustrated in this example. You can also deal with inequality constraint rather than equal here. So you have this inequality, and in this context, the associated optimization problem is the following. Another interesting point is to reformulate an optimization problem using indicator function. So typically, if we consider this minimization problem here, x hat can be equal to argminimum of fx, where x belongs to D, is equivalent to find a x hat belong to the argminimum of fx plus an indicator function dx, where the indicator function is equal to 0 if x belongs to D and plus infinity otherwise. By doing that, you see that in the objective function, you impose here, by imposing ID either equal to 0 or either equal to plus infinity, you impose the objective function to reach a value x belonging to the set D. Because if you are not in the set D, the objective function is going to take the value plus infinity, and you will not consider this solution. And equivalently, this optimization problem can also be written like that, where you have x hat belonging to argmin of f tilde x, where f tilde x is equal to fx if x belongs to D, and plus infinity otherwise. So the point of this first slide are the following: is to allow non-finite valued function, and like that it leads to a unifying view of constraint and unconstrained minimization problems. So at the end, as expressed maybe in this one, you see that you can formulate a constraint problem as just the minimization of the function f tilde. So in this course, the main question that will be addressed are the following. So first, we are going to talk about existence and uniqueness of a solution. Then we are going to characterize a solution, considering necessary or sufficient condition for x hat to be a solution. We are going to explain how to design an algorithm to approximate a solution when no closed form solution is available. And designing an algorithm means we are going to build a sequence xn such that the limit when n go to plus infinity of xn equal to x hat. We also are going to talk about evaluation of the performance of the optimization algorithm, and that means talk about convergence rate. So, for example, if there exists a row belonging to 0, 1, and a n star such that for every n greater or equal to n star, there is a mistake. Okay, sorry. So the point is the following: a convergence rate means that you have this inequality here, leading to a linear convergence rate, and the main question is, what is this value of rho here? But you can also achieve superlinear convergence rate, and you can also achieve quadratic convergence rate. Another important question is the robustness to numerical error. Another question is the amenability to have implementation in parallel or distributed implementation. So now I introduced what is optimization, which consists to find a minimum of an objective function f. I'm going to introduce several examples of f, which are often considered in signal, image processing, and machine learning. So first, I'm going to introduce the example of Laurent say he does not hear me anymore. Is it okay for you? Caroline, could you hear me in the room? Okay, so I can continue. So in the context of Okay, so in the context of database and supervised learning, first we need in supervised learning to define a database. So typically we define a database S, which is composed of UL-ZL. So typically if you deal with classification of images, UL is going to denote an image. So typically it belongs to Rn. And ZL belong to the class you want to classify. So you can classify dog or cat, or you can classify other kind of species. And as you can see here, it's maybe more difficult to classify it. So here you have stick insect and chameleon, and you see that ideally you would like to say that to identify a way to classify the two top images as chameleon and the two bottom one as stick insect. And then the objective of supervised learning is to find new images and to still be able to classify them. So the question is how to learn this prediction function here. So now how this problem turns to be a minimization problem. So So before that, what I would like to notice is that in supervised learning, you have several choices for H and G. So typically in the previous example, UL was an image and ZL was a label belonging to the class of chameleon or belonging to the class of stick insect, but you can have many things to classify. So typically, in the context of you want to classify univariate signals with n samples, H is going to belong to Rn. Now, if you want to classify a multivariate signal with n sample and m component, then H is going to belong to Rnm. So H is this quantity here. If you want to classify image, as it was before, H is going to belong to Rn, where n is going to be the number of pixels in your image. If you want to deal with graphs, in this context, if you have n nodes in a graph and you have a multivariate information on each node, you are going to classify a quantity which belongs to Rn times m. So you see that this formulation of a database is very general. So UL can denote many things. Similarly, what is G? G can model either when you deal with binary classification, it's just G is going to be -1 or 1. If you deal with multi-class classification, G is going to be the K classes. If you deal with regression, you are going to have G equal R. If you deal with multivariate regression, G is going to be equal to RK, etc. And so the objective is to learn a function D going from H to G. So here are examples. So typically it was a study we had in order to learn to classify signal coming from intrapartum fetal heart rate in order to improve the delivery. And so this is a typical example where the optimization tool I'm going to present in this course was used. I'm going to skip this one. This was an example in physics. At the end, when you want to perform supervised learning, it turns to be a minimization problem because you want to minimize the sum of a data term and a prior, where the data term is going to involve ZL which can be the classes, the value you want to estimate, things like that. And UL is going to denote the image you want to classify, the signal you want to classify. And what you want to learn here is to learn the D. And so the minimization problem turns out to minimize D, to find the D which minimizes this objective function involving this data term and possibly a prior. We will define that much in detail later. So here are a few examples. So typically, if you deal with ridge regression, and in the context where you have a linear predictor, du equal to x times u. And in this context, the objective function you want to minimize is the following. This is the data term, and this is the penalization. So you want to minimize L2 norm subject to that the x you want to find is minimum in terms of L2 norm. Then you can handle with logistic classification. So here in this context, you see that the data term is different, is the following. But in this context, you still have this L2 norm as a penalization. And so here, what we call D previously is just this variable x here. Then, so this problem turned to be convex smooth problem, but we will see that we can handle with much more complex thing. So for instance, just a remark saying that, okay, you can either directly consider this linear predictor, but most of the time what you do is not directly, for instance, consider the image or the signal, but you consider a transform version of this signal and this image. So typically you can consider scattering transform. So you have your image, you perform scattering transform, and it's going to give you the coefficient that you put as an input of your classifier. But then in terms of optimization, it does not change anything because you still minimize an objective function of this form. It's just UL that is going to be chained as phi UL. So other minimization problem we can handle with are so the same one, but considering rather than the L2 norm, a L1 norm. A L1 norm. So you see that in this context, it's what we call sparse regression. Here it's going to be the sparse logistic classification. So you replace just the L2 norm with the L1 norm here. And you also have SVM classification. So in SVM classification, initially here you have a L2 norm, but here you have inch data fidelity term. The common point to this, to all this minimization problem is that they are convex, but they are non-smooth, which means that in this context, you can not just handle with typical gradient descent algorithm. So you also have other minimization problem when dealing with kernel-based predictors. So I'm not going to detail it, but here you have a link to Julien Méral course where you have a lot of information on it. And the last point I would like to mention is the context of neural network predictor. So in this context, D, so the D which is involved in our minimization problem, is going to be, so D is applied on U. So you see that the U is here. And so U is the input of several transforms, such as linear operator and also activation function. And the difficult part here is, as you can see, when you deal with neural network, you want to learn both the weights and some parameters that can be involved in the activation function, which means that the resulting optimization problem here is very non-convex, which makes the minimization problem much more difficult to handle with. So now I'm going to talk about an image processing example. Do you have any question regarding the previous slides? No questions?
No question here. I just check the chat to be sure. No question until now.
Okay. Okay. So then I'm going to give other example of minimization problem that are often encountered in now in image processing. So typically, when you deal with inverse problem, we observe data Z. So we observe data Z, which is a degraded version of an original image X bar. And most of the time, a standard degradation model is the following. So Z equal to A X bar plus epsilon. And in this context, A is going to denote a linear degradation. So for instance, a blur, but it can be decimation, it can be a radon transform, a lot of standard linear degradation you can consider. And you have epsilon, which is not a noise. For instance, it can be a Gaussian noise or a Poisson noise. It can be also impulsive noise. And a standard way to solve it is to minimize this kind of objective function here. Once again, as it was for supervised learning, but in this context it's not anymore supervised, you want to minimize a sum of a data term and a penalization. The data term involves the X you want to recover and the Z, which is the observation. And then you have a penalization in order to enforce some prior that you have on your solution. So when you minimize this kind of objective function, so typically that's these two results. So this is the degraded one. It's a zoom of a much larger image. Here it's when you perform inverse filtering. So typically when you do not have a penalization. And here it's when you have quadratic regularization. So typically when F2 is going to be equal to either X, which was also the penalization, I think. What is the link between the prior, the indicator function, and the definition of D mentioned earlier? So, okay, sure. Here you see, maybe I can remove everything. So previously, what I introduced, in a sense, is previously we want to minimize fx over x. Okay, so in this context, in standard example, in supervised learning, inverse problem, and other example I'm going to give you, you will see that f is not just one function to minimize, but most of the time is a sum of two functions, f1 plus f2. And we will see that because of that, standard schemes such as gradient descent and even proximal point algorithm, which is designed to minimize just two functions, is not always adapted because, for instance, the proximal, we will see, it's maybe too early to detail that, but the proximal, the proximity operator associated to f is difficult to compute. So in such a context, when f equals the sum of f1 and f2, you need to have recourse to much more complex algorithm involving separately or the data term and the penalization. So it's the reason why, for the moment, I introduce several optimization problems where you have a f which is maybe more complex. So that is the fault relation between f and f1 and f2. Now, your question is dedicated to the indicator function. So true, for the moment, I do not talk about indicator function. So, for instance, in inverse problems, a typical example of constraint is, I don't know if I have a lot of room here, but you see, you can be interesting to minimize, for instance, ax minus z plus, let's say, yeah, we just consider L2 data term, so I'm going to detail. And you see that x should belong, for instance, to a range 0 to 55 most of the time. And in this context, you see that here you have a specific form of D. D is going to be this set. So it's true that in this context, I do not define D. Another kind of D in some image processing problem, what the people are doing is they minimize, for instance, let's say the L2 or let's say the L1 norm of x subject to ax minus z square lower equal to epsilon. And in this context, D is going to be equal to that, to this constraint, while f is going to be this L1 norm. So I don't know if it answers to your question or not. Okay, great. So I was explaining that for this regularization here, F2 penalization is typically either the L2 norm or dx in L2 norm, where d can be either a finite differential operator or Laplacian operator. I'm going to detail it for another example later. But this is typically the kind of penalization you encounter to obtain this result. And the last result is obtained when you consider for F2 dx in L1 norm, where d is the finite differential operator. So typically you compute the difference horizontally and vertically, and then you apply the L1 norm on it. And you obtain such a result. And you see that it improves a lot the results. So it means that considering L1 norm makes sense in order to have better results. The main difficulty here is that it gives you better results, but at the cost of being non-differentiable. This is also a challenging question. How to handle with such a non-smooth penalization and more generally non-smooth objective function. Yeah, it's another kind. I talk about that because then I'm going to reuse this example later, but previously, I'm not sure if it was not clear, but in this experiment here, the data term was a L2 norm. When you assume that the noise is a Gaussian noise, most of the time, your data term is the following. Now, if you consider Poisson noise, then the data term you consider most of the time is associated to the minus log likelihood of the Poisson distribution. And in that case, it gives you the Kullback-Leibler divergence, which is expressed as it follows. So at the first sight, it seems more complicated to handle with than just the standard L2 norm, but we will see that in the context of proximal algorithm, you can handle with it quite easily. And this function stays convex. And you can also, when you have correlated noise, you can want to handle with a square Lobis distance, which is expressed like that. So now to finish the part dedicated to the examples, I would like to introduce the very basic example we are going to consider in the practical session, which is how to restore, sorry, not a degraded image, but a degraded signal. When we assume that the X we want to recover is piecewise either constant or linear. So typically, in this context, it's exactly what. Sorry, I have some trouble with the pencil. So this, so here you have the time. And this signal is going to denote the original X bar. Then you have access to only a noisy version of it. So that is going to be Z. So Z equal to X bar plus epsilon, where epsilon denotes noise. And you want to recover, let's say, X hat, and you hope that the X hat will be as close as possible from the original X. The solution to do that is to minimize this kind of objective function where you have this data term. So you want to find the X which is close from Z plus a penalization involving the L1 norm. And where the L1 norm is applied on the, where D is the matrix associated with a filter, let's say small d, which is equal to -1, 1. I'm going to just compute the derivative of your signal. And by applying the L1 norm, the point is that you are going to compute the derivative, let's say, of the red one, and you will just, with the L1 norm, keep the coefficient where the derivative is sufficiently high. So this is the benefit of the L1 norm. But once again, the L1 norm is non-smooth. Yeah, I would like to give you an example that we dealt recently with some colleague in the physics lab. So just to specify, so I'm CNRS researcher in the physics lab, and so it's interesting for that because we have a lot of signal image to deal with, And most of the time, the challenging part is that the image or the signal are very large, which means that our algorithm need to be very efficient, else they are not interesting to use our algorithm. So for us, it's very challenging. And here is an application in the context of solid friction, where the typical signal you have to handle with are this one, this noisy, you see the noisy black here. And here is the signal you obtain at different regimes. And the difficulty here is when you work with the physicist, they are not only interested by denoising one signal, they want to denoise plenty of them, because then they want to establish a regime diagram. And to do that, they need a lot of denoising. And they need a method flexible enough to deal with a large range of signals. Here, by the way, the common point is that the signals they are interested in are piecewise linear. So you see it's this behavior here. And actually, the orange curve we obtain here is achieved by minimizing this criterion when D is associated with the filter y minus 2, 1. And in such a context, we are then able to deal with a lot of to extract information from these signals. So just to conclude this part, this introduction about optimization, non-smooth optimization, why non-smooth optimization is important in signal image processing, but also in machine learning. I would like just to give you a brief history of sparsity. So sparsity is what motivates a lot the L1 norm, and also the development on proximal algorithm, what I'm going to talk then. And so for me, it's also important to understand what is the history of this L1 norm and why it becomes so popular. So here there is a reference of a work by Morini, so my colleague Patrick Flandrin, Eric Fleury, and other colleagues, where they extracted several references from I do not Easy Web of Science, I guess, and so they extracted all the reference where the word wavelets were involved in. And interestingly, what we can see, so maybe I'm going to zoom on the part in it, you see that you have the development of wavelets, and once you have the development of wavelets, then you have the development of problem and sparsity, because the notion of sparsity, which is associated to this L1 norm, was mainly due to the previous development in the wavelet community. And it was a lot, and then sparsity lead to the development in compressed sensing. And also, it's not written here, but in parallel, you have a development of proximal algorithm. So here, it's an illustration to motivate the minimization problem involving the L1 norm and to understand why they are also so interesting. So first, I would like to introduce a standard denoising example. So typically, you have a noisy image Z. Then you consider the wavelet coefficient associated to this image Z. So I don't know if you are familiar with it, but typically you have the wavelet coefficient at different frequency. So here you have very high frequency, and so typically here you take your image Z, you perform a low pass filtering and a high pass filtering for on the row and on the column. You obtain some coefficient. You do the same thing in the other way, and you obtain the other coefficient. If you perform high pass filtering on row and both column, you obtain this diagonal coefficient, and each time you perform a decimation, and then you process several times, and you obtain this kind of decomposition. But I'm quite sure that a lot of you are already familiar with that. And what you can see on this image is that you have a lot of very few coefficients which are going to be related to noise. And interestingly, if you threshold the coefficient with very small intensity, you obtain this kind of coefficient where only the coefficient with the larger value are kept. And so you do it by applying the soft thresholding. So the soft thresholding, I think I have an illustration here. So mean that if you are between the value minus lambda and lambda, you keep the value, is the white area everywhere. And if you are, if you are between minus lambda and lambda, you set the value to 0. So it's all the black area everywhere. And if you have in this range, here or here, you keep the value, which is going to be associated to the white area. And once you do that, then you perform an inverse wavelet transform, and then you go back to an image which is very close to the original image, but without noise. Interestingly, this soft thresholding operation, which is written like that, can also be associated with a minimization problem. A minimization problem involving a L1 norm, a L2 norm, and a L1 norm. And more generally, all this process here can be summarized by this minimization. Find the X, which is close to Z, plus a L1 term, L1 norm, apply on Fx, where F is going to denote the wavelet transform. So you see that I gave you a lot of examples, and I don't know if I have some place here, but on all these examples, the common point was having a data term, having a penalization. So most of the time it's the sum of two functions. And the common point is that in the literature, if a lot of research at the beginning started with smooth objective function, let's say during since the last 20 years, people were interested a lot by L1 minimization and maybe L1 to norm minimization and other non-smooth function. So this non-smooth function have several interests. First is going to perform selection. So typically here, if you have several atoms, you are going to select just a few of them. So it's one of the properties of the L1 norm. It's the reason why it performs denoising, as explained before in the wavelet example. Another interest of L1 norm is to deal with overfitting, because you know that in learning, so you have different kind of of results. You can be underfitting. In that case, you see that you do not model very well the separation between the two classes. You can have overfitting. So in that case, you model very, very well, but maybe it's too good. So if you have a new element in the learning, then in that case, you will probably do not classify it correctly. And the L1 norm help you to find a model which is complex, but not too much complex due to this sparsity. And so you will achieve something like that. The cost of dealing with sparsity and all these benefits is to have non-smooth optimization. Okay, so if the goal is to have a question from Philippe Flores, so if the goal is to have sparsity, why don't we use the L1 norm? So this is a very interesting question. So L0 norm is a very interesting measure and allows you to capture sparsity. The problem of the L0 norm is that this norm, it's not exactly a norm and it's not convex. And due to that, it implies a lot of complex problem in optimization. And it's the reason why researchers propose the L1 norm, to use the L1 norm rather than the L0 norm in order to stay in a convex formalism, even if non-smooth, but at least convex. I would say that maybe the limitation of the L0 norm compared to the L1 norm. So if you see, I take once again the example of my noisy signal here. Most of the time when you deal with sorry. So you have the noisy signal. The difficulty is that if you deal with the L0 norm most of the time, so maybe you will not find exactly the change at the good location, but if you do, most of the time you are going to quantify, to estimate correctly the amplitude of your signal. While if you consider L1 norm, it's true that most of the time you will introduce a small bias in the estimation. So what people propose is to use L1 norm in order to have a more robust algorithm, because if you stay in the context of convex algorithm, you are more, how could I say, the convergence is more strong. In this context, then you can obtain the L1 solution and then re-estimate it in order to improve the value here. By the way, in this specific context of denoising, of piecewise constant denoising, you have efficient algorithm in using dynamic programming, giving a good estimate of the L0 minimization, but it's not true in a general context. It's very specific to this piecewise constant example. Is it? Do you want more detail, or does it answer to your question? Okay. So, what do you mean, Laurent? Maybe, Laurent, you can put your mic on if you want to. Okay, so I'm not sure to understand what is the point. So the point is that maybe I can answer like that. The L0 norm is a challenging question. The point of this course, maybe at the end of the course, I'm going to talk a bit about non-convex optimization. So there are some tools in order to deal with L0 function, but at the price of very or lower convergence guarantees. And maybe I could also comment, but at the end of the course about that, we can see that dealing with a non-convex function can have impact on the solution you estimate. When you deal with a convex function, convex objective function, whatever, and if the solution is unique, as in the context of piecewise constant denoising, you design an algorithm, you know that the solution is unique, and then you know that whatever the initialization you do, your algorithm will converge to this solution. And depending on the application, it could be very important or not. And it's the reason why the first part of this course is very dedicated to convex optimization, but convex and possibly non-smooth, which is a way to go to L1, L0 quantities, but to not handle it exactly. So now I would like to explain that in this course I will deal with general class of minimization problems. So in order to answer also to a previous question of Philippe Flores, so typically here it's like saying that fx is going to be equal to a sum of function fs applied on LSX. So that is very important because it means that in a real problem that we are going to consider in signal image processing and machine learning, most of the time we do not have just one function f to minimize. We have several functions, and it can handle constraint, as I explained before, in order to answer to Philippe Flores. And the other important point is that we, most of the time, need to manage linear operator, LS. And this is a very challenging question because, and I will give several solutions to deal especially with this linear operator in the following. So the constraint we handle with when we consider this kind of optimization problem is that most of the time we handle with a large data sets, possibly with non-smooth function. We want flexibility in the design of the objective function. And if possible, we want parallel implementation. So in order to answer to all these questions, this talk is going to be dedicated to the class of proximal algorithm, and especially to forward-backward algorithm, Douglas-Rashford algorithm. I will talk about a bit about Peaceman-Rashford algorithm also, to ADMM and primal dual proximal algorithm. What is very interesting when I managed to find the reference dedicated on Google Scholar where the term proximal algorithm is used in article, or not only on the title, but in article. And it's very interesting to see how this kind of subject grows during the last... Oh, yes. Maybe I can just finish that and I take the question. So it's very interesting to see how the proximal algorithm subject was more and more popular in the last year. And interestingly, you see that it seems to become more stable, and it's very related to the start of deep learning. And I think the part 7 of my course is going to be dedicated to unfolded algorithm, and we will see that the proximal algorithm could be a nice tool to understand the unfolded algorithm. And it's probably the reason why I'm quite convinced that maybe not the term exactly proximal algorithm, but a derivative of it will be used in the future. Yes, Caroline.
Can you please explain again what does proper mean, and explain also the notation from Rn to R to D gamma S? Can you explain this notation, please?
Yes, sure. So I'm very sorry for that. And actually, all these basics are going to be defined. So it's a good question to introduce the next part. So in the next part, I'm going to introduce more in detail what is proper, what is convex, what is lower semi-continuous. So I do not answer to this question too early, because I have several slides to help to understand that. What I can understand is just to say that the linear operator LS go from Rn, which is the input space, to this space. So that it's a notation. Most of the time, I use it when I consider L as a discrete difference operator, and in that case, epsilon is going to be related to the grid, and so this quantity is going to denote the size of the grid. And so then Fs, because Fs is applied after Ls, go from this quantity, but here I could have also written here like K. Where K is just a number, the size of your quantity after applying Ls, and here then it go from Rk to minus infinity to plus infinity. And maybe this point, I did not insist a lot on it on the first slide of this course, and it was very important. When I handle with a minimization problem of this form fx plus an indicator function ICX, if you remember, ICX is going to be equal to 0 if x belongs to C, and plus infinity otherwise. And including this plus infinity typically allows you to deal with this constraint in the function f. So it's the reason why here you have plus infinity included. Is it clear?
Yes,
I'm then going to define all these concepts.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Other question? Because I think then I'm just going to give you reference, and I'm going to the second part of this course. So if you have any question regarding this part, do not hesitate.
No question here. I will check the chat, but I think there is no question.
Okay, perfect. So just to finish this part, I would like to give you several references that could help if you want to understand more things dedicated to convex optimization. You have these two famous references. This work is also a good starting book. the work by Boschko and Combet, I will refer a lot to it during my presentation. So actually, there is a new version. It should be this one. And you have also very interesting, so that are not books, but articles dedicated to proximal algorithm, and one more dedicated to machine learning and one more dedicated to signal and image processing. But I think they are good reference if you want to know more about these schemes. Ok. Je dois pouvoir le... I think I can handle myself to download the next presentation. Okay, can you see the second part? Okay. You can see only interrogate. Okay, yes. Okay, perfect. So in this part, I'm going to introduce some basics. What is important to notice is that all the schemes I'm going to talk about are designed for general Hilbert spaces, even if in most of the signal processing, image processing, and machine learning application, most of the time the Hilbert space is reduced to a standard Euclidean space. So sometimes I will give you. It was not so important annotation.
No, don't worry, Nelly. It's just sometimes when you wrote on the slides, when you are disconnected and connected, you can only see one part of what is written, but it's not a problem. I mean, on your last slide of references, it was not so problem. So.
Okay. So sorry, but do not hesitate to interrupt me if there are other problems. Okay, so I was saying that in a general context, you can formulate all the algorithm I'm going to present in the context of Hilbert spaces, but in signal, image processing, and machine learning application, we can focus on a finite dimension, and we will see that it will help us a lot either in the convergence, guarantees, and on other part. I'm just in this basic concept most of the time deal with general Hilbert spaces, but you can just replace each time the Hilbert spaces as an Euclidean space if it's allows you to understand more easily. So Hilbert space is a complete real vector space endowed with the inner product. And the associated norm is defined as it follows. It is important also for us to define what is a linear operator L. And we say that a linear operator L is bounded if you have a finite norm. It is important to notice that in finite dimension, every linear operator is bounded. In the following, when I'm going to say that L belongs to B, H, G, it means that L is a bounded linear operator that goes from H to G. A notion which is very important in all the algorithmic schemes are the definition of the adjoint of an operator, which is defined by L star. And this L star is defined by the following relation. So the scalar product, so if x belong to H, if y belong to G, the scalar product between y and Lx is equal to the scalar product between L star y and x. So here is an example. Typically, if you take a L, which go from H to Hn, and typically L is going to take as an input x and is going to duplicate it n time. The question is what is L star? So in order to answer to this question, we first write the scalar product of Lx times y. So Lx is going to be equal to that. Y belong to Hn, so we define it like that. By performing the scalar product between these two quantities, you obtain this relation, and you can reformulate it like that. And you see that here, this quantity corresponds to L star y. So which means that L star equal to the sum of yi. So I would like to notice why L star is important. First, it's important because most of the time when you want to compute the gradient or the proximity operator, we will define it later. It will be defined in part 3 and 4. You need to compute L star. When you consider dual formulation, it will be explained in part 6. You also need to define L star. Then it's important also to know that in finite dimensions, L star is just L transpose, which simplify a lot of things in most of the problem you are going to consider. And the definition of the adjoint is very useful when in terms of implementation, because when you want to implement an algorithm, you need L and you need L star. And in order to see if your algorithm converge, we'll see that there are several checks to do, but one important check to do is to see if your adjoint is correctly implemented. And in order to see that, you use this relation, for instance, by generating two random vectors x and y, and see if this scalar product is equal to this one. And like that, you can check if L and L star are correctly defined. About the norm of the operator, this norm is important because you need it when you implement gradient-based procedure, because the convergence of gradient-based procedure are related to this norm. We will see how. It's important to notice also that you have this kind of relation. And something which is very often used in implementation is the normalized power method in order to compute the norm of L. So typically, if you just have access to L and L star, you apply the normalized power method and it gives you the norm of L as the output. So I gave you in MATLAB the implementation, but you can see, you can check by yourself by implementing a linear operator, its adjoint, and see if it works correctly. So now I'm going to define important concepts which are proper, lower semi-continuous, and convex function. This is very important because when we consider this minimization problem and associated algorithm, we will have stronger guarantees if these assumptions are satisfied. And if a function is proper, lower semi-continuous and convex, we say that f belongs to gamma 0 of h. The other point I should have added is that f should go from h to minus infinity plus infinity. So let f, a function going from h to minus infinity plus infinity included, where h is an Hilbert space. The domain of f is denoted dom of f and correspond to this. So the definition is the following, and the function f is proper if the domain of f is not empty. So here are two examples. So maybe we will attempt to make you participate. I don't know if it will be possible. I open so I can see all of you very clearly. So if someone wants to raise the hand, I can see you. So here you have two functions, one which is defined on all R and one which is defined, you see here the function goes to plus infinity and here delta is included, and the question here is do you think what is the domain, and do you think that these functions are proper or not?
So who wants to answer?
So if it does not work, I'm going to give you the...
No, we will find someone. I will design someone. Ah, yes. You see? Just have to wait.
Okay, no, I was checking the okay.
On the left, it's proper, but not on the right. Because on the right...
left is proper.
F is proper on the left, but not on the right, as f is not defined when x is less than 0.
So I'm going to give you the answer for the left one. So here, the domain of f is R, and this function is proper as the domain of f is not empty. Then for the second one, so this actually, this draw is, we will discuss of it because the domain of f is 0 excluded delta, and I write it that it's proper, but actually it depends on the value of delta. If delta is strictly greater than 0, yes, but if not, the function is not proper. So here now is the definition. So it's just a reminder of the indicator function. So the indicator function of C is defined as IC of x, which is equal to 0 if x belongs to C and plus infinity otherwise. And so here is an example. You see that. So you see the function take the value 0 between delta 1 and delta 2 and is plus infinity otherwise. So this is a standard illustration. A quantity which is very useful when you talk about optimization is epigraph. So let f be a function. The epigraph of f is defined as it follows. It involves x and zeta, such that fx is lower or equal to zeta. And here are two illustrations. One for the absolute value and one for the indicator function. Epigraph, it's it's important when you want to deal with convex optimization, but more generally, it can be useful when for problem in image processing. For instance, in astrophysics, when you deal with Stokes parameters, you can be interested by imposing some constraint of this form, and you want to estimate both IN, QN, and UN. And in such a context, you see that it fits the framework of an epigraph. Another problem where in image processing an epigraph is used is typically when you want to project on the L1 ball. So this projection can be complicated. So, especially in large dimensions. So what you can propose is to split this constraint into two constraints. As for every n, the absolute value of xn is lower or equal to zeta n, and the sum of zeta n lower or equal to eta. And by doing that, it's like imposing this constraint. But you see that here, you obtain an epigraph constraint. So now I'm going to define the concept of a function which is lower semi-continuous. And we say that a function is lower continuous if and only if its epigraph is closed. So here you have two examples. And you see the main difference comes from this point. So this point is excluded, this point is included. So I'll let you a few minutes to think about it, and I will give you the answer to see which one is lower semi-continuous and which one is not.
So someone want to ask this question? So for the two functions, can you say which one is LSC or not?
Okay, so someone already.
Yes, because if not,
Answer
we will have
to-
to wait and no coffee break until the answer.
Okay. Oh yes. Okay. Sorry, it's the coffee break. So maybe
No, don't worry.
I can stop.
Oh, you already give the answer.
No, because someone answered in the
In the chat. Okay, very nice.
answer in the chat. So okay. So the second one is indeed is lower semi-continuous, because you can see that here this part is not included in here, while this one is included. And it's the reason why, in such a context, the epigraph is closed, while this one is open, is not closed. So F here is the same example, and you can see here that this part is not included, while here, oops. Oh, sorry, I have some trouble. Oh, it doesn't work, so I'm going to stop here and just give you the illustration. So this one is not lower semi-continuous, while this one is lower semi-continuous. And you see that is very important, because I think I have a slide dedicated to that. It means that if you want to deal with lower semi-continuous function, it means that if you handle with constraint, as illustrated here, you need to handle with lower or equal constraint, and not strictly lower or strictly greater constraint, because in that case, the associated indicator function will not be lower semi-continuous. And so it's very important, because once you design an objective function, you need to keep in mind, even if the specialist, the biologist, the physicist say to you, okay, I know that this value is just strictly positive. It means that if you want to design the algorithm and stay in the framework defined in standard convex optimization, lower semi-continuous, convex proper, with the convergence guarantee associated with it, you have to find a way to not deal with strict constraint, but replace it by oh, there is a mistake here. But rather with lower or equality constraint or greater equality constraint. An important point is that every continuous function of H is lower semi-continuous, and every finite sum of lower semi-continuous is lower semi-continuous. I would like, this is also the thing for the supremum. This is very important because if you remember well, what we are interested in is something which is like that. We want to find the X, which minimize the sum of Fs function. So that is very important because if you know how to prove that each function are lower semi-continuous, it means that the sum of this function stay lower semi-continuous. And it will be important to see if this property stays the same in the context of convex function too.